Hello and welcome to the second webinar in our legal content marketing series. My name's Helen and I'm a content marketing executive here at HitSearch. And today's webinar is being hosted by one of our directors called Andy Donaldson. Andy has over 8 years experience working alongside our legal clients and helping them implement and manage really a variety of our digital marketing services. Today we're talking about how law firms can utilise both the organic and paid for elements of social media. So hopefully you'll leave the webinar today with a few tips to help support and deliver your content marketing strategy with social media. Also, actually, if you've missed our first webinar about the benefits of content marketing in the legal sector, you can download a copy of the webinar in the TV and radio page on our site. So I'll just hand you over to Andy now.
Thanks, Helen. Just a quick welcome and thanks everyone for registering and taking the time out of your day to further your knowledge on social media. As Helen said, we are doing a series of webinars. This is 2 of 4, as you can see. So it is something that we will assume that you understand some of the areas of webinar 1 and that you are interested in the areas 3 and 4, which we'll cover off in 2 separate webinars. So there will be some assumptions made on this, but of course do feel free to just download and take the tips and hints out of this particular webinar itself. As I said, thanks for the attendance. What you should get out of this is a greater understanding of both the earned or organic part of social media and how that can be applied for your law firm, and also the paid for options of through social media. Now bear in mind it's an hour long, so we're going to be a little bit limited to sort of the range of topics. You know, you're not going to be fully educated in both organic and paid for social media. So just be aware of that. There is a question section at the end, so do feel free to listen to what I have to say for the next sort of 40-45 minutes, and then jump on and ask me any questions that you feel are relevant a little bit further down the line. I know that some people just waiting to register, so I'll just wait a further sort of few seconds. In terms of you'll see when we start going through the slides, social media progress is a bit of a journey. It's not something that, a bit like traveling to the airport and going on holiday, we always forget things. We always think when we're on holiday, we should bring this next time or do this differently. And it's a little bit like that social media, particularly the organic side of it. We need to try and understand the areas that we may try 50 things, targeting 50 different audiences, and we may get to a certain situation where we understand only 2 or 3 of those audiences are responding as we want them to. Excuse me. So it is a trial and error. It's an organic process. It needs to grow with our knowledge and our targeting as law experts, essentially. Everything we talk about will be related to the law space. So if you're one of our retail clients, you're on the wrong webinar, basically. So apologies for that. But yeah, if you're interested, feel free to hang around. Okay, let's get started. So in terms of our experience, I just mentioned retail is a big area that we operate, but we've got a fairly large stable of legal clients, and those businesses cater for a wide range of claims, everything ranging from personal injury right the way through to commercial law, serious injury. So we work with a number of law firms that specialise in serious brain and spine injuries from a variety of causes. Also right the way down to the more common areas of law, potentially from a consumer point of view, which is flight delays and claims arising from that, and also the PPI side of things. So really right away from the sort of fixed case £500 side of the equation, right away through to the more serious 2 or 3 year long gestation period of cases that either happened abroad or serious injuries in the UK, which take a bit longer to come to fruition. So the point being is that you're sort of listening to the right people, really. We've been through the social media process with a variety of different targets, with a variety of different audiences targeting a various sort of size of claims, so you're in the right space. Okay, let's make a start on our journey. So first of all, a quick introduction, I guess, to sort of social media, really. And I guess the most interesting thing is it relevant to the legal sector, essentially? I think a lot of law firms, when we go and talk to them on an initial engagement, we go and say, well, you know, these are the areas of the digital marketing spectrum. We talk to them about PPC, we talk to them about SEO, of course, we talk to them about certain elements of the display space and programmatic. We talk to them about attribution modeling, which is covered off in our last webinar, so we went into a little bit of detail about that, so it's worth going to our, as Helen said, go to our TV and radio page or the legal sector page and download webinar 1, and there's a section on attribution there. But essentially, you know, is it relevant? And a lot of law firms we speak to at the initial engagement stage feel that it's something that is a little bit further down their agenda, or it's something that they seem to want to put to one side and focus on the main things like SEO and PPC. And I guess to a certain extent that's right, to a certain extent, but really when we look at the recent progress from platforms like Facebook and Twitter particularly, and even LinkedIn to a certain extent, depending on the audience you're targeting, the actual data that they have available that we can advertise against is vast. So if you have a slight inkling what your typical audience is, or what your target audience is, and as marketeers we need to understand who we're talking to regardless of whether we're sending a leaflet or whether we're doing a piece of digital marketing. So if you have an idea of who your typical claimant is, or certainly who the higher value claimants are and where they tend to sort of spend their time, I'm pretty confident that most of your audience, if not all of your audience, will engage with a social media platform at some stage throughout the day. But eConsultancy did a report, I believe it was last year, on the legal practices across the UK, and they asked a number of questions. It was a survey essentially, and what came out was really interesting. You can see from the graph here that only 30% of the audiences, or the audience that responded, voted that 30% was that social media was the key channel for them, or certainly as sort of the first choice, as it were, which is really interesting. But again, so that kind of backs up what I'm saying, but I guess to a certain extent what we need to think about really is not necessarily whether it's the first choice, because I think sometimes as marketeers we're more interested in what is the direct response channel. So if I spend X amount, £5,000 per month, will I get 50 cases, or you know, of which 25 of which will continue as an accepted case, and then we can work our conversion rates down from there. And that's important, and we're going to talk about some areas that are a direct response social media tool, I guess, or a direct response way to look at social media. But from our research with law firms particularly, and this is in other sectors as well, social media plays an important footprint in most journeys that convert into a lead or even a phone call with a law practice. So although looking at social media as a direct response should work for you, and it should be more than 13% in terms of the first choice, there is a very key influencing role that social media is playing. And if you think about it today, I mean, bear in mind it's probably about sort of 10 past 11, maybe something like that now, 11:15. How many times have you engaged with social media already as an individual? And of course, in the law space, we are all potential audience people. We all at some stage in our lives, you know, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on the way you look at it, will need to make some form of claim through some form of injury, potentially, whether it's road traffic more commonly, or a slip and trip maybe at the lower end of the scale, and hopefully in theory less cases than the sort of more serious injury, but certainly at some stage we'll have to go through that process. So we are the audience, and if you think maybe on your way to work on the train or the bus you're checking Facebook, I'm nearly 100% sure. If you're a slightly older demographic, if you're slightly younger, you may be looking at Instagram or Pinterest. Snapchat probably less so these days, but certainly social media plays a very important part in the sort of conversion process, and so we as law firms need to be in that process somewhere along the journey, whether it's at the introducing stage or whether it's at the final conversion stage as a direct response tool. We need to be in that somewhere, and so you know, really crude sort of tracking would say go live with a social media campaign, measure your last click, sort of your last click conversions, but also look at your top conversion funnel through Google Analytics. And we spoke about attribution in webinar 1, so definitely download that and just look at that section. If it's relevant, you can sort of fast forward, so you don't have to listen to me waffling on. But certainly, if you look at the top content funnels in analytics, you will see that social media plays some form of some sort of step or footprint as part of the conversion process. And the conversion steps, excuse me, these days are getting wider. So maybe 5-6 years ago, people were typing into Google, you know, serious injury claim or the particular medical definitions of serious injury, for example, fractured fibula or whatever it may be. But but now what they're actually doing is they're typing in a longer string of keywords, arriving at sites, leaving, arriving at other sites, leaving, all pinned by a number of different channels, be it social, PPC, SEO, and even offline to a certain extent, although a bit more difficult to track. So think about social media differently, I guess. Go back to your data, have a little look at what influence those sort of parts may be playing at the moment organically, and then maybe look at some paid activity and see how that sort of influences things along the journey. And as I said, in terms of cost, you're looking at a very low amount, maybe £1,000, £2,000, £3,000 to test if you're looking at a very specific audience targeting profile, which you can do very specifically with all forms of paid for social particularly. So we'll cover off paid for and organic in a second, but this slide really is just to sort of say, look, try and open your mind a little bit, use data to try and understand a bit more about what your audience is doing at the moment, apply maybe a little bit of paid activity just to try and understand whether your audience is there or not. So yeah. A good way to try, follow on from the last slide really, if you're trying to understand whether your audience is there or not, look at your competitors. So we've picked up Waitman's here, Clifford Chance and Linklaters LLP. So these guys, I'm not suggesting they're doing it really well, but what they are doing, and this is one of the things we'll come on to later on, what social media gives you is a voice. And what your competitors have got here, whether you think they're doing it well or not, is they have a voice. There's an old PR adage many years ago where they said, look, there is no bad PR. All PR is good PR. And so we've got to think a little bit about that with social media, particularly organic social media. We need to make it relevant. And I think what these guys are doing particularly here is not making it that relevant. And so, for example, the Ed Lewis comment at the top there from Waitman's, the sort of hijacking on certain things like TalkTalk, data breaches, which was the issue some time ago where TalkTalk had a security issue that they were hacked. Now, we've got to try, when you look at your competitors, try and understand what that post is trying to target. Now, okay, we can say it's targeting cyber threats, but how's that relevant to somebody that reads that they're trying to target? So there's a few ways to look at it. Noise is good, so be visible in social media. Have an organic social media plan, which basically just means, make comments on industry sort of goings on, maybe politics, bring that into it if you want to be daring, give your opinion on things, and just that constant noise is a good thing. But taking it to the next level, when you're thinking about your own organic, which is your own natural social media, so not paid for basically, try and talk to a person. So identify your audience. We do a lot of persona research, so we actually have pictures of our clients' target audience on the wall, and they have literally a picture or an image just taken from iStock that we think matches the work and the research that we've done, and we know, we make a good guess at where they go and have a drink on the weekends. We try and understand where they take the kids on holiday. We try and understand what we call a watering hole. So where do they complain about things? Where do they tell their friends about a great restaurant? Where do they tell the friends about a great service from a law firm they had? And so by understanding all that and putting the picture in place, we know we can have a one-on-one communication. And I think particularly digital marketing is possibly a little bit behind maybe more traditional marketing, which is digital marketing still needs to have a one-way communication with an audience, not one way as in they can't talk to us, but it needs to zoom in and identify, if possible, on a small group of people, or if even better, an individual. And of course, there will be several thousand individuals that we can focus on. But when you read a tweet like that from Waitman's, I want to, as a digital marketer, I want to understand who they're talking to, and I'm not sure they quite understand who they are talking to there to a certain extent. But having said that, what they are doing is getting noise out there. And I guess as a starter for 10 for social media, the most important thing is just to make sure that you have an organic social media plan in place, which we'll come on to next, and just make sure that you are seen in that space and you have a share of voice, because your competitors have got that. Okay, interesting slide. Why bother? Always an interesting question. Why bother? We're all busy people. Marketing teams are under increasing pressure in law firms to generate leads, whether it be through websites or over the phone. the search landscape particularly is changing all the time. Digital marketing is moving at an unbelievably fast pace and will continue to. So let's get used to that to a certain extent. But because we're busy, we need to make sure that we've got a plethora of options digital marketing wise that we can choose from. Why bother with social media, I guess is the first question. So we'll examine 4 areas that we feel are the most important reasons why you should bother, essentially. We've kind of touched on this. And the image really says it all. It's a great megaphone. It's a platform to announce your expertise in a space to a very specific audience. The more specific you can get to the audience, the better the target, the better the outcome. So that's of real importance. But essentially, starter for 10, the most important thing is have that share of voice. Secondly, we've already discussed this again, your competitors are doing it at the moment. Some better examples than the Waitmans example, and that's just literally one example of their overall sort of social media strategy. So, no offense to Waitmans, as it were, but certainly others that are doing it. So they are targeting an audience that you want to go after, and in a space where not many law firms are doing it, it's kind of a steal on the market if you are doing it. So make sure that you have an organic social media plan in place, identify a channel, identify an audience, and communicate to them on a regular basis. I guess one of the questions that we were asked last time we did a social media seminar to the retail space, they said, well, how often do we need to do it? Well, from a standard inbound marketing methodology, really, this should be around 5 social media posts to 1 blog article. So if you're creating blog articles for your site, and we'll come on to content further down the line in the webinar series, but if you're creating content on your site, you need to really promote that content, and the best way to do that is through social media. And so a standard inbound methodology would say 5 tweets per 1 article. So that gives you a rough idea where you need to be. And we try, Helen does a great job of this, and create at least 1 blog article per working day. So we do about 20 a month. It's a lot of work, particularly understanding which audience we're trying to communicate to, which is, I guess, you guys, and that's why you're on this webinar. So to a certain extent, we have some success with that. So really, have a look at the competitors, see what they're doing, make sure you've got a plan in place, and go for it. Point 3, we've already touched on again. We already mentioned this morning that we're an audience, of course. Everyone will potentially make a claim at some point. So we already use it. So let's make sure we get in front of them. And of course, what we're trying to achieve with digital marketing, we're trying to ensure that people find our website and essentially don't find our competitors. So really, social media plays quite a key cog in that journey. And we're only really looking at this small cog, which is social media at the moment. Last time we talked about attribution model, and we talked about an introduction to content and how that plays in the equation. And again, we've probably only got about half an hour left, so I'm conscious that we're taking up some time, and we're only really looking at one tiny bit. There are much more elements that come to play, but essentially social media will allow you to be found online. Okay, so how do we do it? I guess is the best way to sort of follow on from that. So we understand that there are 2 parts to it. First of all, let me introduce that. So that we've talked about organic social media. Excuse me. Essentially, organic social media is really the stuff that you do without paying for it, I guess is the best way to phrase it. So you can set up a Facebook profile, a LinkedIn profile, you can set up a Twitter profile, and the idea is to understand the audience, as we already mentioned a few times, and create a number of carefully targeted tweets that are scheduled to go out frequently across those platforms that establish your voice in those areas, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn as an example. So that's organic, and we'll come on to organic in the next couple of slides on how we think you should go about it, essentially. Okay, it's sometimes, by the way, it's also called earned social media. We call it organic social media. I guess the comparison is between SEO and PPC. SEO is organic search results page listings, and PPC is the paid for search listings. So I guess organic and paid social media are kind of the same thing. Organic is what you do naturally. It's what you do without having to pay for, in this example, a social media listing, but a search result listing as well. So according to Quora, easy for me to say. And the lifespan of a tweet is 18 to 20 minutes. We've already mentioned this, so 5 tweets per 1 blog article. So if you're doing 1 blog article a day, really you need about 25 tweets a month, a week, or more like 100 a month. So frequency is key. If you think about your Twitter feed as one example, as soon as, you might follow maybe 50, 60 people, as soon as you read one tweet, it's very difficult to find it 2 or 3 hours later, and I sort of challenge you to do that. So look at a tweet, earmark the time, and then go back into your Twitter maybe 2 or 3 hours later and try and find it. And so it's, frequency really is really key to this. Particularly with Twitter, and even now more increasingly with Facebook and particularly LinkedIn, try and make it relevant. Use a hashtag. Try and potentially even hijack industry trends. So you saw the example of Waitmans, and they were trying to jump on the sort of cyber threat with TalkTalk. Maybe not as generic as that, because hashtag TalkTalk is kind of not really relevant to a legal firm and what we're trying to target. But try and jump on the most generic keywords that you're trying to target. And my advice here would be to look at your paid search and your organic SEO keyword list. So speak to your agency and say, what are our most or top performing keywords from PPC and SEO that generate us leads? If your agency can't tell you that, then you've got some problems, but certainly start with that point and then start using those as your hashtags, as your point of reference in some of your tweets. It can significantly improve the searchability. I think we just made that word up, but it sounds great, so let's go with it, of the post almost immediately. So basically, if someone does a search, it will, in Twitter, for example, it will bring back a hashtag quicker than it brings back anything else that's relevant. So make sure when you put a post that it must have at least one hashtag. And the clever ones, and I like to think that we do it sort of well, I say we, Helen, but try and fold the hashtag into the text of the tweet. So for example, looking at this, if we wanted to target, let's look at this social content, for example. In this example here, using relevance and even trending hashtag, we would put stamps your hashtag social content as current. Just in that really random example, if we want to target social content, put those 2 words together, which is important, and put a hashtag in front of it, and we would then be visible to anybody searching for social content. Now again, we're not interested as an agency landing on being visible on social content, and neither are you guys as law firms, but it's a great example. According to Post Planner, the lifespan of a Facebook post is a bit longer. 75% of the engagement received by a post happening within the first 5 hours. So less frequency is required on certain channels, more frequency on others. Twitter particularly frequent, Facebook less frequent. And when you start to look at LinkedIn, again, probably similar to the sort of the Facebook gestation period of a post. So think about that differently. Think about a different strategy for each of those channels. If you feel your audience is on there, and Facebook have got some great audience profiling software, so you can look at who which audiences you could potentially go after, and we'll come on to that in the paid section shortly. But certainly have a think about that. There are some tools, Hootsuite is one, for example, that you can schedule your social media across multiple channels in advance. So we use a piece of software called HubSpot, which allows us to do that, but Hootsuite is kind of similar to a certain extent, although HubSpot does a lot more for us. But you can basically pick on a channel, upload a tweet, schedule the tweets out for the month coming. So you can sort of do the work up front, load in the system, and then almost work on the following month while your tweets are being delivered. So it's less time consuming than you would think, essentially. According to Social Media Examiner, including images in your posts results in 85% increase in interaction rate. So, and on Facebook can help increase retweets by 35%. So quite big numbers. People respond to video these days, and images much better. Video, you only have to look at the rise of YouTube over the past sort of 4, 5, 6 years and beyond, really. Purchased by Google, I think it was 2 years ago. And because of they kind of thought, well, we could build it ourselves or just buy YouTube. It was running away that quickly. It's something that we as an agency are offering paid for advertising models on, because video, particularly from a video SEO point of view, is becoming bigger and bigger for law firms. So it's something that we're talking to our clients about in this space. So something that certainly you guys should look at. And make sure you're in with the best chance of organic post engagement. So try and be as specific as you can. get to the point as quick as possible. Waffling in the social media space is a big turn off to an audience. So that's why the use of hashtags can really bring attention to a very specific point that you're trying to focus on. So that's really important to think about. So that concludes the organic or earned social media. Just to recap, essentially organic social media is classed as any tweet that is organically generated for free out of your social media accounts. Well worth utilizing it. The other reason why it's worth utilizing just cropped to my mind now is because social media is becoming part of the SEO algorithm more and more as time's gone on over the past sort of 2 or 3 years, and we call it social signals, and Google looks at these social signals as part of its relevancy algorithm. So you being visible and having a voice, which is one of the points we started at the very start of this webinar, just having a voice in this space means that you will be more visible in search engines, so it will complement your SEO efforts. So if you see spikes in SEO traffic once you've gone live with your organic social media program, don't let your SEO agency take credit for it. Look at your analytics, work out where that traffic's come from, and take credit for yourselves. Okay, moving on. Paid social media kind of does what it says on the tin. It's, I guess, the quicker route to market to be visible in social media, but crucially, and we'll come on to this, audience targeting is key here. So why bother with social media? So there's 5 points here. The first point, it's very easy to track. So, and that's right down to an ROI. Now, we put a pound sign in there. We understand in the legal space we're targeting leads, but ultimately, when an accepted case is accepted and when it moves through to completion, that equates to cash in the bank from a law firm. So, you know, I think sometimes we forget a little bit that what we're trying to achieve as a digital market agency is to put cash in the bank for law firms, I guess, if that makes sense. So return on investment is still valid in this space, in a lead gen space, as it is in a retail space. And what paid social allows you to do, which is a bit more detailed than organic social, is it allows you to, well, certainly from the interface you get from Facebook, for example, it gives you very, very detailed information. There's a piece of tracking code that goes on your forms, and it allows you to track down to the volume of leads, and then allows you to put a piece of tracking code that then spits out into your database, so we can then follow what happens on your database, where the cases are opened or closed, when they are, and what the value of those cases are. So we can track from paid social right down to an ROI figure, which is really important. And I guess just jumping back to this point, we mentioned at the very, very first few slides, we need to think about the attribution model that's at play here. You know, so which, you know, paid social being part of this journey. Don't think about it as a last click thing. Well, of course, jumping forward to paid social, we are thinking about it as a last click thing, as well as that path along the journey. So that's really interesting. It does sort of both of those things. Just to recap, anyone got any questions, please feel free. There's a chat available there, so post any chat questions. I know Helen's going to gather some questions as well and ask them towards the end. So if you don't catch the webinar, if you're joining us partway through, apologies. It is being recorded, it is live, so we'll be posting it on our TV and radio page, hopefully later on today, hopefully, if we've got time, Helen. And then also it'll be on the legal section on our website as well. Okay, back to it. So what are the benefits and why use paid social media? The key thing is the targeting. Yes, we can measure ROI, and that's important, but we can really filter down, right way down, not just in terms of age, location, gender, but more specifically their interests. Obviously location as well, but particularly their interests. So if we know, going back to our persona, and we've got a picture of our personas on our wall here for our law firms, if I look at a certain persona and I'm looking at, in this example, her, I know exactly where she spends her time. I know her age, I know obviously gender, I know where she lives, I know where she works, and I know that she's interested in these 5 or 6 things. Obviously, we won't give those away for free, but she's interested in these things. Here's where she spends her time online. Here's what she does when she engages with social media. So we can target that through particularly Facebook in this example, and maybe less so Twitter, but certainly LinkedIn as well. So we can be very specific about interests. So going back to that point I mentioned earlier about watering hole, where do these people spend their time? We can identify that very specifically through social media, through paid social media. Actually, and going back to this, we can actually identify whether we've got in front of them and where we've got in front of them and whether that's been successful. So when we go back into paid social the following month or the following day, we can tweak our audience targeting accordingly. Ads are flexible and easily measured. It kind of does what it says in the tin, really. It's the same with PPC, really, and paid social in that space. Very specific. We can turn on or off, raise visibility or reduce visibility. We can amend them as we go continuously, almost in real time to a certain extent. There is some ad approval process, but it's pretty much you know, a sort of a real-time process. So we can make them stronger and more effective the longer the campaigns run, which is really interesting. It says here it's easy to set up. I would say it's quite easy to set up. It's not the easiest of things. So if you're a digital marketing manager, head of marketing, head of business development for a law firm, it might not be something that you're used to going into not a technical interface. It's an advertising interface with Facebook and LinkedIn, and it's fairly intuitive. It's been designed for people to be able to do themselves. But if you're stuck, give us a shout. We can put you in the right directions. No problems with that. But it is fairly easy to set up. And it literally is a step-by-step guide. So when you go onto Facebook advertising or Twitter advertising and you go through the process, it does sort of guide you down the road a little bit. So it's literally sort of a step 1, step 2, step 3 equals high-quality leads. A little bit tongue-in-cheek that, but of course that's ultimately what we're interested in. Basically, it works. You know, it says that we've witnessed Facebook audience working very well for our legal clients. We've got, we've worked with maybe 15, 20 law firms, most of which we continue to work with. Some we do project work for over the past sort of 2 or 3 years. All of them, bar maybe 1 or 2, include a social media process, particularly paid social media. What I will say is it needs to be very specifically targeted. If you say, I want to get in front of the entire UK, I want to get in front of all males and females between the age of 20 and 55, I want, regardless of location, not interested necessarily on audiences and interests and all that kind of stuff, it won't work. There'll be a lot of waste. Facebook particularly is not as clever to sort of say, I want to be in front of these people because I know they're going to convert to leads. So you need to do that work for Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. So be specific, which means you spend less, which means you get a higher return on investment. So it kind of works for you, but I would argue spend more time on the audiences side of things, really, before you go mass market, mass target. Really, start small and then build audiences up, and that's the way you can go after it. So that concludes our webinar, just on 40 minutes. So we've got a couple of minutes really just to sum up and talk to you about the webinars coming up. And then any questions, feel free to fire them through from now on in. But basically, as our judge is saying there, you can now confidently boost the visibility of your firm's content through social media. So that's almost worst case scenario. Worst case scenario is that you now, going back to the organic point, you now have a share of voice, you now have an audience listening, you have an audience engaging, and through paid point of view, you're almost forcing and reinforcing that that part of it. But worst case scenario, you have an audience. Best case scenario, once you get built up, you've got a tool to drive leads to your business. One thing I will mention is you need to have a system in place to track phone calls. It's really, really important. Depending on, in our experience, depending on the size of the case, so for example, an RTA £500 fixed fee case might be happy to complete a form and you contact them, sort of thing. Somebody that's had a serious injury, whether it's on the road or at work or abroad, in my experience, very, very rarely will just make an email inquiry. They want to talk to someone. They may have some emotional issues that need working through as well as part of their injuries. They essentially have more complex cases which need the interaction of a human than a web form. A lot of the time won't do that job. So make sure, and of course, what you want to be able to do is when people are calling up the firm, you want to be able to track that back to the social media activity. So there are ways to do that. I won't go into it now, but we've got a lot of experience of tracking phone calls through the back-end systems like Proclaim, for example, back-end systems of most law firms, and we can tie in the form, we can tie in a specific phone number that replaces all of the phone numbers on your website, dependent upon the referring source of traffic, in this example, social media. So the website code that we install recognizes the referring source of social media through, for example, Facebook link through to the website. It then real-time changes all of the phone numbers across the site, so wherever they go in that session, they see a specific phone number that you give us, for example, that is unique to Facebook, unique to Twitter, unique to LinkedIn, and actually works for PPC and SEO as well. So having that in place is so important, because all will happen is you'll go live with social media, whether it's organic or paid for social media. You will increase traffic to your website, you'll increase phone calls, but they'll go into a pot, and don't expect your call center or your staff, when they ask them where did you hear about us, don't expect them to say Facebook. They'll probably just say search engines or radio or whatever, or particularly on a web form. It's the most unreliable way to ask where you heard about us from, because all they do is they click the drop down, whatever's on the top of the drop down, they click that, and everyone says, oh, it's radio, it's great, search engines aren't doing anything for us because nobody clicked Google, and it's just not the right way to do it. So this is a surefire way to understand exactly how many calls that come through to your site. So thanks very much for attending. So let me just have a quick look before we go into this. That's just your question that Helen has just said. Just one question. Would you suggest starting with paid social media to gather a following, or start organically using social? And it looks like that's come from Twitter, I believe. Would you suggest starting with paid social? I think if you're going to do it properly, you need both. I think starting with getting a share of voice through organic and earned social media is the right decision to do. It's quite easy, quite straightforward. You can schedule them up front. Yes, it's extra work. But in terms of starting with paid, what it will do is it will identify your audience for you. So I guess if you're just dipping your toe in the water and you want to start with one or the other, start with paid. So the answer is yes to that. Yes to use paid to start with. It'll allow you to target much more specifically. It'll allow you to test the water, I guess. You know, you might go live with Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter with a paid activity across those three channels. You might realize that LinkedIn very quickly is not generating any phone calls, not generating any sort of direct response leads or anything else, but Facebook's doing really well, and maybe Twitter less so. Then you know then where to start your organic activity. So I suppose if the ideal world, you go live at both at the same time and tweak both as you go. In reality, as law marketeers, we probably don't have that much time, so start with paid, and you can get some very quick, within 24 hours, data to say what's working and what isn't. So, so yeah, that's the answer to that. The other question I had from a client, actually, just coming to my mind, I think it was last week or the week before, is kind of what I've already answered, really, which is how to integrate the web forms with a Proclaim database. It's not a quick answer, not an easy answer, and if that's something that you're interested in, I'll go into the detail at another time, probably not on this webinar, but I'll go into that detail another time. But that's probably one of the questions that crops up more and more, is particularly with Proclaim, because that seems to be what most law firms use as the database that handles the leads at the law practice end, basically. So let me know what that is. The other question that comes up quite a lot is SEO still relevant for law firms? And I know it's not social, but the reason I'm raising the question now, and I've already alluded to it in the previous sort of 40-odd minutes, really, is that people are moving away from looking at digital marketing in silos. So is SEO relevant? Is social relevant? Is PPC relevant? And the clever marketeers from the client side and from agency side are starting to look at how each of those individual elements are talking to each other. So is SEO still relevant? Yes. Is it still relevant as a standalone lead gen? Probably not as much as it once was, because of the way in which the market's changed. But again, going back to webinar 1, definitely download that if you're interested in this topic I'm talking about now, which I guess is attribution modeling and attribution reporting. Start off with understanding how each of these channels are talking to each other to generate leads, rather than looking at does social media work, does PPC work, does SEO work. So I thought it's worth sort of preempting that. Any other questions, Helen, you've gathered? I don't think so. Just looking across. I don't think so, no. Okay, webinar's completed now. This is the second of 4. We've not assumed that if you register for this webinar that you want to be registered for the others, so if you do, please sign up. We'll send you a link following this to the other 2 webinars. Please do make sure you sign up if you're interested. The other topics we'll email across as well, so you know what they are basically. What we're actually offering for registered attendees of this webinar is a free 3-month content plan or a content marketing analysis, and that includes some social media elements in there as well. So the series of webinars really is trying to give you a guide as to which are the main elements that contribute towards content marketing. That's how social media fits in that, because it's content related. So if you are in the market for a content plan and just want to have a bit of a sort of guide as to how a legal specialist digital marketing agency approaches social media in a wider plan, then let me know. We can either give you that plan as a bit of a freebie for attending, or give us your plan and we'll do an analysis on it, let you know where we think you're going wrong. Again, you won't be able to click on this image, of course, because it's a webinar, but we'll email it in the following email in the next sort of hour or two's time, certainly before end of play today, and you'll be able to request that from that point in. So it doesn't seem there's any more questions. Just want to say thanks very much for attending. It's been my pleasure, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you.